What is the best keyboard for residents? If you're anything like me, you may have realized that we do a ton of typing in residency, and you may have thought that at some point you want to get a nice keyboard because we're on our keyboards all the time. It'd be nice to have something that's nice to type on. And you know, I'm no stranger to mechanical keyboards. I've had one for a very long time. I was a professional gamer, so I used like the Razer Black Widow and the SteelSeries 6GV2, if you guys remember those keyboards. But there's something lacking about some of these keyboards, and there's good non-mechanical options as well. And so in this video, I want to really take you through my process of how I went about choosing a new keyboard as somebody who really didn't know anything about the actual hobby itself. And this was all spurred on by seeing another co-resident doing this, so shout out to John for kind of introducing me to this. So I guess why don't we just start off with the first keyboard. This is the CoolerMaster MasterKeys PBT S. It's in brown switches, and you can see it's very dirty. I've been using this for a long time, and it's just a very standard 10 keyless keyboard. It's lacking the numpad that you see on this side over here. I've been using this for several years, but recently I kind of had a realization that I just didn't really like how the typing experience was on this keyboard. And you can kind of hear how it sounds as well. When you press on the keys, they kind of just have this kind of unstable, rattly sound to them. And when you click on them, it's just not super satisfying either. So as you can tell, just really not the best sounding keyboard and just not that satisfying to type on either. And so after that, I started kind of looking into scissor switch keyboards, which I think is kind of the first branch point that you should make when you're deciding on what kind of keyboard you want. You know, do you want to get a scissor switch non-mechanical keyboard, or do you want a mechanical keyboard? Now, the advantage of a scissor switch is that it actually has a pretty good mechanism compared to the old rubber membrane domes that were, you know, before. Like, these scissor switches are actually pretty good, and they're very satisfying to type on. My personal example is the Apple Magic Keyboard. I've actually always felt that it's actually pretty satisfying to type on the Apple Magic Keyboard. It has this very light feel. It sounds pretty pleasing when you're typing on it. And when I'm typing on it, I feel like I'm like in an office situation, and it really makes me feel productive. And so I was kind of looking for something that would kind of emulate that for a PC, because obviously the Mac keyboard just, you know, a lot of the keys are in the wrong spaces, so it doesn't work well. So the two options that I looked at were this keyboard from Dell. This is the Dell KM7120W, and it's a wireless keyboard, which has a nice advantage. It's very thin and sleek, very nice looking keyboard. And the reason I decided to get this Dell is because I actually had used a Dell KM714, and I actually felt like it felt amazing. It felt great. But unfortunately, they stopped selling that one, and so I had to go with this one instead, which was the closest replacement. Unfortunately, it doesn't work quite as well as that KM714 did in terms of its feel. Here's a quick sound test of this keyboard. And one thing I did want to mention also is that it has a nice little numpad there for all those people who like numpads. So that's very, very handy as well. So honestly, it's not a bad keyboard at all. Obviously, I can type very quickly on it. I love its appearance. It looks great. I love how it sounds, actually. It's very pleasing. It's very quiet. And I was thinking about returning it, but actually after typing that, I might actually end up keeping it just for personal use, just in case. I really like that it has wireless, and it can look really clean on your desk. And also it can link up to your phone or your tablet or whatever you need via Bluetooth. So a lot of advantages there. The one downside that I would say is that the keys are a little bit harder to press down than I would like them to be. The Apple Magic Keyboard, I think, is a little bit lighter and more pleasing to type on, whereas this one's a little bit more fatiguing. So that was one of the things I didn't like about it. So I ended up trying a different keyboard, which is a very, very well-known and popular one called the Logitech MX Keys. And I also got this in the compact form factor as well, the Logitech MX Keys Mini. So this is what this keyboard looks like, Logitech MX Keys Mini. As far as the aesthetics, I'm not as big of a fan of the aesthetics compared to the Dell. It is very thin as well, and Bluetooth and 2.4 gigahertz capable, and it's a very, very popular keyboard for people who want a non-mechanical keyboard that's really good for productivity. It also comes in a full length size as well. It also has some cool gimmicky features like this white backlight that turns on only when it sees your hand approaching and stuff like that. So it's got some cool features for sure. But for me, I just didn't like the way that the keyboard sounded and the way that the typing experience, it did feel kind of mushy to me. And I want something that has more of a tactile feel, but also just typing on it, it just sounds kind of rattly, even though it's like a very high quality built keyboard. So let's just do a quick typing test and show you guys how this one sounds. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that the other downside is they don't include this 2.4 gigahertz dongle for you in the box. You like actually had to buy it separately for like $15, which is kind of a little ridiculous when you're paying like $100 for a keyboard. They should really include this in the box. I don't really feel that it's just not a very satisfying keyboard for me to type on. You definitely want to choose a keyboard that really kind of speaks to you, to be honest. And unfortunately, this one just doesn't do it for me. But you know, this is a very, very popular keyboard with a lot of fans. A lot of people use this. And so I don't think you can go wrong getting this keyboard. But just for me personally, it wasn't really the best keyboard. So the last non-mechanical scissor switch keyboard that I wanted to kind of test out was the Microsoft Surface Keys keyboard, which people say is very close to a replica of the Apple Magic keyboard. Unfortunately, I didn't get my hands on one, and I didn't want to test too many keyboards. But that's another option that you could probably look into if you're looking for a non-mechanical scissor switch quiet keyboard like those two. So next, at this point, I was kind of thinking, you know, both these keyboards I wasn't super satisfied by. You know, going back to the Dell, I actually kind of like the Dell a little bit, so I might renege on that a little bit. But at this point, I was thinking maybe I should go back down the mechanical keyboard route. You know, the mechanical keyboards are a lot more tactile. They are pretty fun to type on, but they are a lot noisier. And so at this point in the branch tree, you're thinking about non-mechanical versus mechanical. And let's say you decide on mechanical. Now there's so many different things that you need to consider once you're getting into a mechanical keyboard. So first of all, you need to decide what kind of profile of keyboard do you want. So there's normal profile, and then there's a low profile keyboard. So here's an example of a low profile keyboard that I got, the Keychron K3. Whereas on this side, you got the big chunky boy. This is the Epomaker EP75. And so do you want that low profile, which kind of gets you the best of both worlds in terms of like in between a laptop and a full-size keyboard? Or do you want this chunky one that's a lot more satisfying to type on, but it's a little bit more fatiguing because you got to press further and your hand has to be higher up, you know, the whole time you're typing. The other thing you want to consider is what kind of form factor do you want your keyboard to be in? So here is a nice graphic I found of all the different form factors you can get your keyboards in. And so here we have the 100% keyboard. This is going to have all your F keys, your navigation panel, as well as the numpad. But then you got this 1800 style here, which kind of compresses that navigation cluster a little bit. You got the very popular 10 keyless keyboard, which is probably my favorite because all it does is it takes off that numpad and you still have this navigation cluster, but everything is where you're used to it being. So you're not going to have to relearn the format of your keyboard. Nowadays, the most popular kind is probably 65% and 75% keyboards. So you can see 75%, you can get this fully kind of compact layout right here. And that's what this keyboard is. This is a 75% compact. But you'll notice here that the arrow keys are kind of in a smaller location and the shift key is smaller than normal. And you'll see a lot of keys are kind of not in the typical place, including the F keys are all going to be in a slightly different place than they would normally be. So for me, that was something that was a little bit difficult to learn the muscle memory. And I was also more frequently, mishitting keys when I was using this keyboard. In terms of a 75% exploded layout, you can see that this one's exploded. So you still have that small shift key over here, but then you get a little bit of spacing in between the arrow cluster, which helps you not really mishit this area because it's not as, it's more easy to identify where it is. And then you got your F keys kind of more in the normal area again, and you still have your page up, page down, you got some stuff over here. But even still, one of the things I didn't like was that the delete key is like up here instead of here, which it normally would be. And I still didn't have the muscle memory for the shift key being so small and all these navigation cluster arrow clusters being over here. And finally, again, going back to a 10 keyless version, you'll see that this is just more of a standard layout. So something like this, where everything is in the correct place that it really should be, except for some of these keys up here on this keyboard were swapped out. There are definitely advantages to having the smaller, more compact factors, however, because you save a lot of desk space, which a lot of people like having, especially if they don't use the F keys very much. But F keys in Epic, you're going to use F2 a lot. And I personally do use F keys very frequently. When I used to play StarCraft, I had to use the F keys a lot. And so there are a lot of reasons to keep the F keys if you use them frequently. If you go down to the 65%, then you'll see that's when they start taking away the F keys, and you'll just have the numbers up there. And you can even go down to like 40% where they take the numbers away too. But that's kind of the differences in the form factors. So that's one key component you need to decide. Low profile versus normal profile, what kind of form factor. And then next, you also have to decide what kind of switches you want. Do you want linear switches, tactile switches, clicky switches, and there's so many different switch types out there now. What kind of keycaps do you want? Do you want wireless and Bluetooth capability? Do you want RGB? There's just so many different factors for you to consider, which is what makes this hobby just a huge time sink, because you can just spend all day comparing between all these different keyboards and all the different minutia between all of them. I'm not going to go too much into depth on those, but those are just things I want you to be aware about in case you are thinking about building your own keyboard or getting your own keyboard, modding it and stuff like that. These are all the key factors that I kind of looked into when I was trying to pick out some keyboards. So first, let's talk about this Keychron K3 that I got. This is the low profile keyboard. You can either get this in the K1 version, which is going to be a 10 keyless version, or you can get this K3 version. And you can also get the Newfie Air 75, which is a different brand that kind of makes a slightly different low profile keyboard, but I ended up going with this Keychron one. And this Keychron one I actually really like. I feel like I can type a lot more quickly on this one, and I still get the benefit of the tactile feeling of a keyboard, a mechanical keyboard. The sound that it makes is actually very quiet and very pleasing as well. And I feel like overall this is a very solid choice. It does not have wireless 2.4 gigahertz capability. It only has Bluetooth and wired connection. And the thing with me is that over time, as I was using it more, this may have been because the layout was the 75% compact layout, and so I didn't get used to it as quickly, but I felt like I made more mistakes with this keyboard. And I'm not sure if that's because of the low profile with the lower travel distance of the keys made it more easy to mistype, or if it's because the layout was just not to my liking. So this keyboard I definitely really liked. I highly recommend this keyboard. And let's do a quick typing test. It's just, you're gonna have to decide if you want a low profile keyboard and you want something like this or not. And so it's kind of up to you and your preference. With this keyboard, you also get a whole array of different lighting options that you can choose from. And you can also get a RGB version of this keyboard in case you like the bright and pretty colors. So like I said, fantastic option. I really liked this keyboard. I think just the form factor wasn't quite right for me in terms of the compact layout. But if I were to do it again, I'd probably get the K1. I might just keep I'm probably just going to keep this one anyways, just because it is a really nice keyboard. It's very compact and it's portable. Just a really nice keyboard overall. I probably wasn't doing justice to it on the typing test because I was kind of like typing really hard. But when you're typing normally on this keyboard, it's really quite a quiet keyboard and it's very nice. So next I started to look into some more traditional sized, higher profile keyboards. And these ones were the Epomaker EP75 and the Cidoo ABM084. So let's take a look at those ones. So again, here is the Epomaker EP75. It's got a full array of RGB backlighting as well. It's got 2.4 gigahertz with a dongle somewhere here, right here. You can just kind of unclick it from here. It's like a really nice design, actually. It just comes out right there, and then you can just click it back in. And it's got really nice, well lubed Gateron Pro yellows that are already pretty nice sounding out of the box. But the problem is the stabilizers on the spacebar. It's really loud. It's not the best out of, overall for a stock keyboard, it's pretty good. But definitely this would be a keyboard you'd probably want to mod. But for me, again, just going back into the layout, I found that I didn't really like the layout that much. And also this keyboard is very, very tall. Compared to the other keyboard that I'm about to show after this one, that one seems to be a bit more of a standard height. And one of the big reasons I avoided a lot of the Keychron keyboards, which are one of the most common and most popular keyboards that you could go for, like the Keychron K8, which has wireless and is similar to this, or the Keychron Q1, which is like a high quality custom keyboard. A lot of people complain about the height and that they need a wrist rest to use those keyboards comfortably. And for me, this keyboard did seem to be one of those things that seemed a little bit too tall for me. And it might have had to do with the keycaps. These are like XDA profile keycaps or something, so that might be another factor. They tend to be taller keycaps. But for me, just the layout and the height of this keyboard were some of the downsides for me. Oh man, I need to clean my desk. Sorry about that, you guys. This is freaking dirty. All right, let's do this typing test. How do I turn this on? All right, here we go. All right, and finally, down to my holy grail, at least for this moment. I really like how this keyboard looks. It's like a very classic looking keyboard, so it looks kind of professional, but it's also got these nice rounded edges that just makes it a little bit more feminine, people were saying. So I don't know, I'm being very corny right now. But really nice keyboard. This is Cidoo ABM084. There was actually a video on YouTube by another physician in the UK who was using this, and he was talking about how this was really great for telephone visits because the patients wouldn't be able to hear him typing because it's not very loud. So clearly this is like a keyboard of choice for physicians, and definitely a very good one to consider. The other reasons I really like this one, so obviously it's got the 10 keyless format that I told you about. It's also got this volume knob, which I have not really used at all yet, but people really like having these on their keyboards these days for some reason. It's got the normal arrow cluster over here, and the shift key is the normal size. Delete key is in the right spot, so you don't have to relearn your computer or your keyboard every time you go into the hospital. You're not going to be struggling to, switching back and forth between different formats. It sounds amazing out of the box, just purely stock, and has its whole array of RGB as well. It's 2.4 gigahertz wireless. It's got Bluetooth connectivity, and also very customizable as well because you can change all the keycaps. It's hot swappable, so you can change all the switches, and pretty much all the the other mechanical keyboard that I got was also the same. That it's hot swappable. You can change whatever switches you want, and eventually you can open this up, put more foam in, do a tape mod, do a bunch of other things to it as well. So anyways, let's do a sound test for this one, and this is my pick for the best keyboard for a resident physician. Obviously, I need a little bit more time to spend with this keyboard to really figure out how it holds up in the long run, but it's just such a nice, so many great things going for it. And what I really like is that you can just start using this right out of the box without any mods. And so eventually I'll probably mod this, but even out of the box without any mods, really like how this one sounds. Very pleasing sound, very quiet, and even like a pretty good space bar too compared to that other one. So honestly, sounds really great out of the box to me, at least. And I think a lot of this is all personal preference. So you really just got to find out what form factor you want, what type of switch you like, and what kind of profile you like. Do you even want a mechanical keyboard or a non-mechanical keyboard? And so again, all of this is personal preference. So you really just got to experiment, try some things out, and find out what sounds good to you. Because when you're typing and you feel satisfied and it sounds nice to you, it just makes it a much more enjoyable experience. So that's just my quick tips and my recommendations on looking for a new keyboard for you as a resident physician. I hope this was helpful, and I really am curious to hear what your guys' comments are in the comments down below, because I am very new to this, and I just want to find one keyboard that I really like. But there's definitely some very knowledgeable people out there, and I'm sure could put even more input out there. But again, this is just my 2 cents. I hope this was useful for you guys, and thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one, and peace.